Welcome to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by the law firm of Beeson, Garner, and Hansen, hosted by attorneys Shawn Garner and Adam Hansen.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and Law. I'm attorney Adam Hansen. I'm in the studio today with Shawn Garner, my partner. We've got Tom Sparks, the new attorney in our office, and we've got Cody Beeson pushing buttons and turning dials and stuff, trying to make us sound and look as good as possible. That reminds me, if you miss a show of ours, you can find them on our website. They are archived or wherever you get your podcasts. So you can go to your podcast app and you can look up Life, Death, and the Law, and we will appear there, and you can subscribe to that so you don't miss an episode. Shawn, we were talking earlier before we got started here in the studio about something that happened last week. Well, some chatter that happened last week over in Georgia in the Fani Willis case against Donald Trump and all sorts of other co-conspirators in the RICO cases that they're trying to bring in Georgia. If you're not aware of the cases that are being brought against, like President Trump, there's Giuliani, there's a lot of Trump staff that have been charged in Georgia in a local state court on racketeering charges, which have never heretofore been used in this manner before. Yeah. Racketeering, for the layperson, is what they came up with. The federal government came up with this idea of racketeering, kind of like made up to get Al Capone back in the 1930s. And the way that they used it was they couldn't get the mob. They first tried to get them on like gun charges and things like that because they were using sawed-off. So that the mob really did it in for a lot of us, gun holders and people that really want to, engage in conspiracy.
I think you're getting sidetracked there, Mr. Hansen.
So lo and behold, these laws are put into effect in most states, these what we call RICO, R-I-C-O, which is an acronym, but the main component of that is racketeering. You're conspiring to do something illegal, and it has to be shown that you had co-conspirators with you, or else there's no conspiracy. So you have to have other people's involved in that, and that they're all on board to do this plan. Okay, so these are the charges that are being brought against Donald Trump, that he was co-conspirating with other people to overthrow the 2020 election.
Can I just point out one irony there? What do Democrats accuse most Republicans of? Conspiracy theories, right? They're these crazy conspiracy theorists.
That is a nice observation.
And what's happening here is that Donald Trump is being charged for conspiracy, which is a theory. So anyway, sorry. Thought I'd point that out.
That is hilarious. Ha. Ha. No, that was funny for a lawyer joke. We talked about Georgia. Okay, so this is the case currently going on, and there's a judge in that case. He's young too. Shawn, did you know how young he was? I think he is 34.
He's a handsome guy.
Nah, I wouldn't say that, but okay. He has no hair.
Scott McAfee? Hey, come on. Baldness is chic.
So he's 34 years old. He's got two little kids.
Charlemagne the God is bald.
And talk about getting sidetracked.
Okay.
And so he's a young judge, but I feel I've been watching hearings, I've been reviewing the case and paying attention to it, and I wouldn't say impressed. I'm okay with what he's doing. He's doing good,
Yeah, I feel that he's even-handed.
He's trying to be, yeah, sure. So what's the issue here? Last week we found out that he's actually going to into the reelection cycle to be a judge, and because he's contemplating or, let's say, entertaining some motions that have come before him, specifically motions to disqualify Fani Willis, who is the prosecutor in this case, and her co-prosecutor, Nathan Wade. If it was found out that they were lovers, and that it's probably likely that she appointed him to this case because of their romantic relationship. So that's all coming out, and it's been just, this huge issue. And that's bad because they're using government money to pay for trips and go to Washington, D.C. It's now been found out that before they brought these charges, they went and met with the vice president. So there's a lot of things going on.
Something that's really interesting is the special prosecutor distinction, because Fani Willis, she is a prosecutor, right? She can bring the case. She can prosecute the case. And that's what's happening with the case in New York with Letitia James, is it?
Yep.
And so She brought the case against Trump. She didn't bring separate prosecutors in. She had a team of prosecutors. But in this case, Fani Willis hired a special prosecutor. And the job of the special prosecutor is to be removed from the political impact and noise of what's going on and look specifically at the facts and remain neutral on it. So that's the irony here is she brings in a special prosecutor who is going to be unbiased because she is an elected official and she's an elected Democrat on the Democratic ticket. And so she needs to bring in somebody that's unbiased. So who does she bring in? She brings in her what would be a nice word for somebody that she's having an affair with?
You call this in the Spanish language Sancho.
Okay. She brings in her Sancho. And I don't know how unbiased he could be when, he's getting paid by her to prosecute this case. So that is the real question here. Now, the legal rule in ethics is you have to avoid any appearance of what's called impropriety. So what's impropriety? It's something that looks bad on its face. They're not only looking bad on their face by being lovers, they are actually compromised, right?
Not only that, but they're lying about it.
Yes.
Because what's come out now in evidence is that they, on the stand, under oath, said certain things where they didn't have this relationship or the time frame was different than what they proposed. And the way that they found that out was because of cell phone records. So they were able to show that he was spending the night at her house.
Yeah.
And all this stuff.
We didn't start our relationship till 2022. And then they go back to 2021 and 2020, and there's like 1,200 texts between the hours of 12 a.m. and like 2 a.m. And I'm like,
So these motions have been brought before this young judge, this 34-year-old judge, and now he's entertaining. He has to entertain them. And the motions are saying, they have breached their fiduciary duty to this case, essentially. They're violating ethics, and they need to be removed. The hope is that from Trump's team is that you remove this prosecutor, they'll have to appoint another prosecutor to the case or a series of prosecutors, and the hope is that the next prosecutor just decides, you know what, this is a stupid case. I'm going to just get rid of it.
Or they at least it will prolong it until the election is over, because this case from the very get-go was calendared to derail Trump's reelection campaign. That it was specifically calendared to have the major hearing and trial on Super Tuesday, where all the candidates get most of the support from the states and get their electoral votes, or I'm not sure. Some states have caucuses, some states have primaries, but that was Super Tuesday, and that's when the trial was to begin. So rather than him being out there on the campaign trail, then he would be in trial, and whoever was his political opponent, it was Nikki Haley, that she's gone by the wayside now, but that was to make sure that his political opponent in the GOP primaries would have a step up, and that's how it was calendared. So now, by derailing their calendaring system, perhaps it goes forward, maybe it doesn't, but either way, it's not going to interfere the way it was intended to.
Yeah, so he's set up. As far as timeline is concerned, Trump is set up to be fine when it comes to election. This is going to delay this. They've accomplished at least one goal, and that's delaying the trial even further, and most likely it'll be beyond the November date that the election would transpire. The problem with that, not a problem, I would say, but a challenge is that even though a president has pardoning powers, it's never been shown before that a president can pardon an individual on state-related crimes, which this would be.
Right.
So he has a pretty wide swath of who he can pardon internationally and federally, but he wouldn't be able to necessarily. I don't know. I think it's a legal question that would be brought in. I'm kind of excited about it, to be honest. I hope he, just from a legal standpoint, he gets reelected, and then it'll be fun to see how he pardons himself, and if it will be kind of over broadly used, and if it's going to be litigated. It's going to be interesting to see how our Constitution handles that through the Supreme Court. So for nothing else, I'd like to see Donald Trump reelected just because of all the legal issues that it will cure or bring up in our constitutional system, and that's never been seen before, and it'll be good to get those issues fleshed out if anything. I mean, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, you talk about the persecution that Donald Trump has endured since being unelected, in his reelection path. He has gone through so much litigation, bringing up all these new questions of first impression that we've never seen before. It's from an attorney standpoint, it's like, oh, this is kind of cool because we get to see, we're seeing how the Constitution is being tested, and it is creating new legal ground and precedent moving forward. So we don't need to worry. Well, I shouldn't say we don't need to worry, but I'm less worried about if this ever comes up again, what will happen, because we have a certainty as to some guideposts that the Supreme Court is going to give to us. And we're seeing that play out, especially with the Jack Smith, is that his name? Bringing the documents case federally, the special prosecutor for the federal government.
Yeah.
So the Mar-a-Lago documents that were found, the top secret stuff that Trump had on him. So that's going before the Supreme Court right now, and so we're going to find out. Jack Smith.
Yeah, it is.
Did I say that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jack Smith. So again, these are legal questions that are being brought to the Supreme Court very quickly, and we're getting an issue. I would just like to see some more protections for a president, and that sounds kind of crazy, but the reality is the way that we've always understood it constitutionally is that the president enjoys immunity from most of this stuff because they have to be able to operate without fear of a lot of unnecessary prosecution, number one. And number two, they have to make life or death decisions in a lot of cases, whether to send a drone strike or not, to do this, and it's split second, big decision making. And I think the founders, this is my personal opinion, of what the constitutionality should be or is. I don't know, I'm a constitutionalist, like a letter of the law constitutionalist, and my belief is that the founders wanted the president to enjoy immunity during their stay in office because they need to be able to operate freely from the fear of possible litigation of an act that they commit within that office. And I think that extends to President Trump's these charges of insurrection and things like that. I don't, to me, that's what the immunity clause is for. But, what do I know? So having said all that, we've got these cases in New York. We've got the federal case for the documents. We've got the Georgia case. We kind of got off track, Shawn. We were talking about the young judge and his reelection down in Georgia. Mm-hmm. What did we find out last week? So before he was uncontested, was my understanding, in this election, reelection campaign.
When he ran and for his current seat right now, he was unopposed. So he's a Republican. And he ran unopposed, and now he's got a candidate that is vying for a seat, and it is a very left-wing Democrat. And that Democrat wants to gin up some support by saying, hey, he's taking a political position on this, and he's trying to support Trump and get him off charges that he was legitimately charged with. So we need to get him off of his position as a judge. And he has this to contemplate as a judge. So the question here is, should judges and should he have to consider this in determining what is right and wrong in the case? And one part of me says no, that compromises his ability to function as a judge in an unbiased way. Another part of me says, well, we want our judges, just like we want our representatives, to be accountable to us. We don't want them to be so high and mighty and above us that they can do whatever they want with what Adam's talking about, total immunity. And what do you think about that, Thomas? What's your position? Here in Yuma County, you have to run to be appointed or run to become a superior court judge, which is the highest position for trial judge in the state, is superior court judge. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a catch-22. You've got benefits on one side where, like the Supreme Court, they're supposed to be appointed for life, so they're not beholden to a political sway. Mm-hmm. And then that's the idea. But then you get somebody who happens to be what we'll call a bad egg, who is affected by political sway, and now you can't get rid of them. The other side is you could feel the pressures if you're elected every election cycle, and you might give rulings that you otherwise wouldn't to affect your voter base. I see downsides on either side. I think the way that you handle both is you set term limits.
Yeah.
You can appoint with term limits.
And with term limits, I think that there's a couple of factors that you want to look into. Number one, how often you have to run for reelection, as opposed to, federal judges are appointed for life. So they never have to run again. They never have to get reappointed. And whereas Superior Court judges, it's a 6-year term. Cody, you should know this.
I thought they were 4 like normal, but I'm not sure. It could be
okay. It might be a 4-year term. And so each term, they need to look into their constituencies. They need to, gain support and from the community. They have to gather so many signatures, and there's an election that's held each term. And that's one factor of term limits. Another one is how many terms consecutively can you run? For example, the president, they can only run 2 terms, period, whether they're consecutive or not. So Donald Trump running with this term, even though that there was a 4-year break in between his service as the president, he would be termed out. He could never run for president again. And I don't know. I think that term limits are an excellent thing. I think that we constantly ought to be kept on our toes. I hate the concept of tenure for professors, right, at universities. So I think that'd be a good thing for judges, absolutely. And I do like the idea that judges are elected, but I can see the wisdom in them being appointed too. So I don't know. We'll be split on this issue. Right now, though, we've got to take a break. We'll come back. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
You're listening to Life, Death, and the Law, presented by Beeson, Garner, and Hansen, the law firm that has been voted Yuma's best.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and the Law. I'm Shawn Garner, attorney for Beeson, Garner, and Hansen. We do estate planning, and we are no wise qualified to give you political advice, but we do it anyway. I'm sitting in
Coming
studio
up,
here with
more
Adam
thought-provoking
Hansen, Thomas
conversations
Sparks,
on
and
life,
Cody
death,
Beeson.
and the law
I wanna talk
right
about-
after this.
Let's go with something light today.
Have a question
How about
or want to join the
racism and
conversation?
affirmative
Our
action?
phone lines are open. Call 344-5258.
I've got this
That's
clip. It's from a Dr.
344-KBLU.
Phil show. I didn't know he still did.
If you have
regular
questions
shows
or want to
still?
know
'Cause
more
this is
about
on
something
YouTube,
that was
so I don't watch
discussed
TV.
today,
Does-
I have no
please
idea.
call the
Does he
law
have a
firm
cable
of
show?
Beeson,
he's
Garner,
actually,
and
like, launched
Hansen
a new
at
media,
928-783-4575
Okay, so he's
or visit
I think so, and I think, a lot of-
kind of
yumaestateplanning.com.
leaning a little bit more like conservative, which is actually would have been middle of the road 10 years ago, but conservative today.
I think that's the kind of media he's putting out now. So, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, he's got some guests on his show. Candace Owen is one of them. Another is a common contributor to the Daily Wire, which is a conservative program. I forget her name, darn it. It's Amalia Ikapanubi. That is how you pronounce it, yes. And they're going to discuss affirmative action. And there's a couple of white individuals and a couple of black individuals arguing on both sides of the issue. And I think they make some very good points here. So let's play the clip, and then we'll dissect it a little bit.
We've dictated, we care about black students, we care about Hispanic students. These are the minorities who are going to benefit from this, and Asians are not, and Native Americans. But the through line is not necessarily socioeconomic status. It doesn't seem to be resources. It seems to be that these are the minority groups that we feel bad for. We don't feel bad for Asian Americans because they have a culture of high academic standing. They have a culture of drive and of facing adversity. We look at black students and Hispanic students and Native American students.
We are inferior,
and
that
we
is
pity
what,
them.
That's what makes my blood boil. I mean, it's just, I am not less than you because you are white. I don't need you to look at me and feel bad for me because of the color of my skin. And that's effectively what you're doing every time you take an application. You say, oh, well, this girl's black, so I kind of feel bad for her, so I'm going to put her at the top of a line. It's just not necessary. I believe, right, that black Americans are capable of performing in the same capacity as their white peers. You two don't actually believe that, because if you support affirmative action, you are basically saying that black Americans cannot do it on their own.
No, what I'm saying is that there's a history of racism and exclusionary practices. And instead, we're reducing it all the way down just to race. And what these admissions practices are actually doing is saying, no, there's a constellation of factors that we're considering in the holistic review of this application.
So remove race from the applications.
Is basically making it about race. You're saying these are the black people, these are the white people, these are the Asian people, these are the Native American people, as you mentioned. But as one of the audience members said, what about people who are of mixed race? You know, I'm of mixed background. What am I supposed to mark on an application? Am I supposed to mark multiple boxes? And plus, if you are painting people
can you pause it for a
as
second?
an oppressor, if you're white,
That's a terrible.
So I want to jump in right there. Her point is well taken, but you could even take it a level deeper. What if you're mixed race? My take on that is, who isn't, right? Who is a pure one race or another, right? You've got some parts of European and whatever else, we'll say Native American and African, and
We're all mutts.
yeah.
Even Elizabeth Warren.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
So that's where I was going with this. So Elizabeth Warren, right? She identified as a Native American.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that she has like 1/1600th of a Native American blood, and so okay, she's Native American, and so we take that concept and you blend it in with the concept that we can identify as other things other than, say, our biological sex. And therefore, if we can change something as fundamental and as immutable as our sex, then why can't we change something as our identity and who we identify with as far as our national origin or who our ancestries were? There was a girl, gosh, I wish I remember her name. We talked about her on the last show. But she was the head of the chapter up in Washington of the NAACP. And she identified as African American. And she led that chapter.
Was it Debbie Weiserman Shorts or something like that? Or
Yeah.
is that the one?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah.
She's now a elementary school teacher.
Something, yeah.
So anyway, she identified as African American, and she was running very successfully the NAACP, and that is the National Association for
The advancement.
of colored people. And she's not actually black. Her parents came out and outed her and said, she's our daughter and we're white, so she's white too. And her response to that was, well, I never had a DNA test. I don't know that you're my real parent. And then they're like, well, why don't you stop taking those pills that make your skin a little darker and stop crimping your hair every day, and let's watch your natural characteristics come out, and let's go ahead and take a DNA test.
Yeah, allegedly.
And if you are white, so be it. You know, you can still be very passionate about your cause, and you can still be good at what you do. You're just not actually a black person. And this gets back to affirmative action. If they're going to give a leg up to individuals that are a certain race or from a certain national origin, what stops us from adopting that race and national origin as our own and getting those perks that come along with it? And when you say it like that, it's like, that's ridiculous. It really is. Like, how stupid are we going to go on this thing? And it's shown out in reality pretty stupid.
I think Candace made a really good point. Anytime that you have race as a factor at all, you're saying that race is, I believe that race to be lesser than another race. That's just essentially that is the default that happens when you bring race into it. And the guy, I hadn't heard that rebuttal, Shawn, from the gentleman that was on there, and he tried to kind of like make it a little bit more suave, where he said, well, it's a holistic view. Race isn't the full thing. We were looking at socioeconomic background. We're looking at race. We're looking at all sorts of factors. It's a holistic view. And I don't know if you caught it there at the very end. We cut off the clip right before that. But what she said was, anytime you make race, you're part of that application process, you're saying this race deserves it more than another because they are inherently bad, or they're inherently dumber, or they can't do it on their own because of the color of their skin. And we cut it off right before that, but it doesn't matter.
At least it's making it a racial issue.
It reminds me of this.
And that is racist.
This saying, I hate to say this over the airs, but over the airwaves, but it's kind of like this idea that I'm going to make some cookies for you, Shawn. And as I'm making these cookies, maybe a little bit of dog poop gets into those cookies, and
it happens.
It's okay though. I'm gonna bake them. You won't even know. I give you these cookies, and I say, hey, lo and behold, there was an accident. I got a little bit of dog poop in these cookies, but it's not a big deal. It's just a little bit.
You won't even taste it.
You won't even taste it. Would you partake of those dog cookies?
I don't know where you're going with this. Definitely not. I'm not eating those cookies.
Well, it's the same concept in theory. It's like any bit of race, any idea that race is going to play a part in an application is like putting a little bit of dog poop into that application.
Love it.
Right, yeah.
Application.
That's true.
It's either all or nothing. Like you cannot say just a little bit.
We can be, let's implicate.
See how I brought that together?
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't see where that was going. I was a little nervous.
Love that.
I didn't see where it was going. That was my Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay, well, speaking of the legend, the myth.
Jerry?
Yeah. I think Seinfeld was one of the greatest sitcoms of all time.
He was one of the greatest.
You, on the other hand, we're working on it.
I'm practicing my Jerry.
So, can we play a clip from Seinfeld in an interview that he had with BuzzFeed? Because he called out on the other issue that has to deal with race and affirmative action, and that's DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, meaning everybody based on the demographic should be equally represented in the workforce, in politics, not in sports. We all agree it's not in sports because sports is different. It should be fully on your merit, but in the workplace and politics for sure. And so we're going to play this clip from Jerry Seinfeld's interview that he had where that was brought up.
I have noticed that most of the guests are mostly white males of 22 episodes that you've had.
Yeah, let's get into that.
No, but you
take a look over here, Peter. What do you see? A lot of whiteys. What's going on here? Oh, this really pisses me off. But go ahead. Really pisses me off. People think it's the census or something. I mean, this has got to represent the actual pie chart of America. Who cares? It's just funny. You know, funny is the world that I live in. You're funny, I'm interested. You're not funny, I'm not interested. Okay. And I have no interest in gender or race or anything like that, but everyone else is kind of with their little calculating, is this the exact right mix? You know, I think that's, to me, it's anti-comedy.
Didn't you say that you originally conceived of this?
What do you think about that?
It's spot on. It's with, and it works across the board. It works with athletics. It works with comedy. Cody, you're a comedian.
I dabble.
You are a comedian.
Say something funny.
Oh,
Come on,
mercy.
funny
Say
man.
it right now. I want to hear something funny. You're a comedian. Just kidding.
I'm not going to get into that.
Something funny.
It reminds me of Finding Nemo. Have you ever seen that Disney movie?
Yeah, you're a clownfish.
You're a clownfish. Say something funny. Say something. Make us laugh. Say something funny. You're a comedian, Cody.
Well, I do know this one joke.
I do know this one joke.
No, but that should be the test. Like, is it legitimately funny? Is that person being real? That's all that really should matter. There shouldn't be these subcategories that we have to qualify for before you're allowed to, move to the next step.
Well, and that's the thing with comedy too, is it makes light of heavy issues that we can't talk about or we feel uncomfortable talking about directly on their face, but there is a lot of truth to it. And you've heard that saying, 90% of the joke is actual true.
Yeah.
And it's a way to come across and to communicate, but to take out the heaviness of the conversation. And I think comedians do a great job, and they have done historically a wonderful job in doing that, whether it's Letterman or Jay Leno. But now, recently, comedians have become political commentators that are very thinly veiled, if veiled at all, as just political hacks. You look at Jimmy Kimmel. That guy's not even funny. I don't even think he should fit under the definition for Wikipedia. I think I'm going to flag Wikipedia's post on him as a comedian.
Fake news.
Because he's a newscaster for CNN that tries to throw a joke in once in a while, and they're not funny.
What's interesting is there is a legal carve-out for funniness. So we can show stuff and we can commentary on it. As long as it's funny, we can say, well, that was parody. So it's not in breach of any copyright issues or slander or anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm just making a
slander
joke.
in particular. Like, you know, I wasn't saying a fact about you. I was making a joke about you, right?
And that's the thing is, like, as a comedian, Cody, you've got complete immunity. So why not use that?
Right? Okay.
You know?
So
you can use it. You can say anything you want as long as it's funny.
Well, as long as it's
a
true.
parody.
As long as it's true. You know, like our newest national park is in Colorado, Aramachi or whatever. It's an old Japanese internment camp.
That's right.
Aramachi.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? So
yeah, you sent me the link of it.
Yeah, we're not doing, you know, beautiful parks anymore. We're doing apologies.
Mm-hmm.
So just think of all the national parks we could plant all over the world.
Yeah, look what horrible thing we did here. Hey kids, come over here. This is where we rounded up all the Japanese people that were productive citizens of the United States during World War II and made them stay in this camp because we were racist. And that was under our Democratic elected president, FDR.
Exactly.
No, I don't think we should celebrate that. I think we should remember it for sure, but I don't know if it's national park status worthy.
That's what I'm saying. You know, and yeah, I'm not going to get into like the deaths. You know, that's a whole nother darker side of the joke. But point being is, we're not going to go there.
Well, I now that you say that though, I talked about recently last summer we went to Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
In Virginia, and we visited Washington's, you know, beautiful estate there, and they were very cognizant multiple times during our tour to talk about how he was a slave owner. Just want to remind you, he was a slave owner. Slave.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a little too much.
Yeah.
But going to this apology thing, it's like they feel like they have to throw in these apologetic kind of, you know, little quips. It's like, I'm sure he did own slaves. I don't need you to tell me every 5 seconds. Like, are you telling me, is he a good guy or a bad guy? What are you trying to tell me? Because you're telling me this whole thing is set up that he's a magnificent person and this, you know, wonderful human being, but then he's not? Like, what do you, is either, you know, what's going on here?
I'm sure he beat his dog, too.
Yeah.
So there's that. And who cares that he helped be the founder of the greatest nation in the world and all of humankind and presented equality to the greatest level that it's ever been. You know, the guy smacked his dog a few times. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, but for him,
I mean, slavery
we
being compared to beating a dog is not the same thing. But we're talking about what was around during that time period and what the social and historical underpinnings were at that time, and we're judging him against what our standards are at this time. It's like we don't want to be judged by the standards of somebody 50 years from now in the future, nor do we want to be judged on how we dress, our work ethic, compared to the pioneers of, you know, the 1850s. They were a bit more conservative and worked a little bit longer hours. I don't want to be conservative. I don't want to be judged on those standards, but that seems to be the standard for judging our founding fathers. We got to take a break. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
Coming up, more thought-provoking conversations on life, death, and the law right after this.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and the Law. I had a fun experience this weekend. I guess we could categorize it as fun. I was going up to my daughter's volleyball tournament, and we had to wake up at 4 a.m. to get there. It was an 8 a.m. tournament up there in Queen Creek. And on my way up, I got a flat tire. And on my car, there are run flats. So those are tires that are supposed to be beefed up with, you know, extra rubber lining on the tires that you can drive another 50 miles even when they're flat. And so because they have run flats, they don't stock the car with a spare. And so the problem was, I got a flat tire more than 50 miles away from my destination, and so I drove it to 50 miles, and then it really was gone. And so I had to call a tow truck, and I was riding in the truck with the tow truck driver to get my car towed in, and we were having this conversation, and it turned to politics, of course, naturally, when you're riding in a truck with a tow truck driver. And he was saying something that I've thought was true for a long time. He's like, what is the deal with these politicians? Why can't we just get somebody normal in there, like some common sense? We've got all these ridiculous policies going back and forth and all of these these credits for wealthy people and these benefits for people that don't want to work and don't have any incentive in life to actually be productive citizens. And I'm like, wow, this is going somewhere. I'm having this nice little political discussion here. And so we talked about that a little bit. And I explained to him one of the purchases that I had made the year earlier was for a vehicle that weighed over 6,000 pounds, because under the IRS code, if you purchase a vehicle and you own a business and you use that vehicle for the business, you can write off 100% of the purchase price of the vehicle if it's over 6,000 pounds. But if it's under 6,000 pounds, you can only write off $17,000. So if you want to be conscientious about what you're driving and get better gas mileage and or just buy a car that fits your needs, then you're only going to get $17,000 write-off. And what new car these days runs $17,000? Or you could buy this big beefy SUV and you could write the whole thing off. So we got talking about write-offs, and it reminded me of this, one of my favorite Seinfeld clips. So I'm going to play this here. It's the best.
Is this my stereo?
Oh, hey, you got it.
Hey, what happened to my stereo? It's all smashed up.
That's right. Now, it looks like it was broken during shipping, and I insured it for $400.
But you were supposed to get me a refund.
You can't get a refund. Your warranty expired 2 years ago.
So we're gonna make the post office pay for my new stereo now?
It's a write-off for them.
How is it a write-off?
They just write it off.
Write it off what?
Jerry, all these big companies, they write off everything.
You don't even know what a write-off is.
Do you?
No, I don't.
But they do. And they're the ones writing it off.
Oh, my gosh.
I wish I had the last 20 seconds of my life back.
What do you do?
So I'm talking to this tow truck driver, and I'm like, yeah. So I had to write off this car. And he's looking at me, and he's like, yeah, you're one of those. And
Why? Yeah, it's a write-off.
Just write it off.
I'm like, okay, it's just turned. I hope I get to my destination. No, it was a really good conversation. But we got into other things too. Saying, he goes, I don't get this. Why is diesel, because he's driving a diesel truck with his tow truck, why is diesel so much more expensive than regular? And I was like, I don't know, because and I don't know about the chemistry of refining gasoline and diesel, but my understanding is diesel is less refined than gasoline, and the more refined it is, the more costly the process. So why would diesel be more expensive? Traditionally, when I was growing up, diesel was always a cheaper fuel, and it made sense. And all of our big rigs run off of diesel, all the things that need to tow stuff with, or you've got big boats, barges, trains, all of those run off of diesel. And that basically runs America. And then I started thinking about it. Who drives diesel trucks? Democrats? Do a lot of Democrats drive diesel trucks? Do you know any Democrat that drives a diesel truck?
No.
No.
Well.
Right? And we saw during the midterm election that the Biden administration released a lot of our oil reserves to supplement the gas that we had available to reduce the gas prices, right? Supply and demand. The more there is, the less it costs. And so they reduced that. And of course, now, right, we've got gas prices that are down below the $4 mark. And that seems to be more palatable to, I guess, the general public than the $4.50 a gallon diesel. But I don't think that the Democrats and Joe Biden is looking for the diesel truck drivers as his voting base. And that's my conspiracy theory of the day, that diesel is higher because he just doesn't care about the people that drive diesel trucks.
I think it's a lot. I've actually looked into this before because I had the same question. Diesel seems to be the superior fuel.
Oh, yeah.
And not only that, but the EU use it. They've used diesel as their go-to more than gas over the last 30 years. So why is it that the U.S. was doing this? And so a lot of it had to do with obviously environmental issues. They were. It's really
more
about
efficient.
It is more efficient, but because of the refinery issue, like it's cheaper to make, it's less refining process, and so they needed to put in some taxes. It's all about taxes and getting money back. So if you were to just do a refinery price, it's going to be way cheaper. It's always been that way, but the federal government in the United States started adding more taxes to diesel itself to recoup environmental costs, is what they're calling that. So in 2006, it says the U.S. began to phase in ultra-low sulfur diesel. Combustion of high sulfur fuels leads to the production of compounds like sulfur dioxide, which can cause respiratory problems and produce acid rain. Europe began tightening sulfur specifications in the 1990s. The U.S. significantly lowered the sulfur limit in diesel starting in 2006. So it was the EPA getting involved, like they always do, for environmental purposes.
Yeah.
And saying, I don't know if it's made up or not.
The next election for the head of the EPA, I'm gonna take that in consideration.
Well, you don't elect them. Yeah.
Oh, darn it.
Darn.
Was that a joke?
It was a joke because they run what's going on in our nation, but they're not elected officials.
Nope. So it's all red tape. Government red tape causes the diesel to be more expensive.
Unfortunately, like the conspiracy theory makes the most sense. Like the diesel is really the backbone of our transportation.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's the semi-trucks. So
how many truck drivers, right? I would love to see the demographic of truck drivers that are Democrats.
And exactly. Look at the truckers in Canada. Primarily conservative movement up there.
Yeah. And so I don't think when Biden's looking at his constituency, he's like, okay, we've got to pander to our constituency. That means lower the gas prices a little bit. Where are we going to shift the cost? Well, let's just shift it to the diesel truck drivers because they're not going to vote for us anyway.
We're out of time. We've got to talk to you next week. This is Life, Death, and the Law.
If you have questions or want to know more about something that was discussed today, please call the law firm of Beeson, Garner, and Hansen at 928-783-4575 or visit yumaestateplanning.com.